guys, and welcome back to another episode of the ADH Dads. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And I'm
And
Steve
hello,
Anderson.
Mr. Anderson. Welcome back. We meet again.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's good seeing you, bud. What have you been up to since the last time we talked?
Man, I have been working on journals.
Yes, you have. Been busy, huh?
Yeah, in the last time we met, right, we started at one point started talking about self-care. And one of the things that I think is just so important, right, is to actually pause, take some time to think about what's going on, right? I mean, how many times have I made a bad decision because I wasn't thinking, I didn't take the time? Plenty. And so, I created a guided journal for dads, so to give them an opportunity to stop every once in a while, right? And you can go in and answer a question that's going to, give you something to think about tied to your parenting and being a dad. And I think when we give ourselves that pause, right, not only is it calming, but we can actually go, oh, I actually have an idea. I do have something I can do. So that's the biggest thing that I've been working on.
I love that, man. And I think this is really important stuff here because I think so many men and fathers want change, but they get so overwhelmed at like where to begin, how to structure it, what to focus on. So, I mean, I remember when I was going through my own, self discovery journey and trying to ask better questions of the man that I wanted to become. That process felt very overwhelming and unfamiliar and uncomfortable. And I wish that I had something, I remember thinking that quite often. I wish I had something to kind of help me through this process and give me some sort of blueprint to, to see what good questions are and to think about stuff that I can, dig deeper and create my own questions for that, what that journey looks like for myself. So I think this is really important, man. I'm really excited to dive into this and get started with you on talking about this.
Yeah. And I think, the questions, right? In one way, you're being a mentor for yourself, right? But when we're stressed out, how do we come up with the questions, right? When we're trying to manage work, right? Our kids, our explosion on TikTok, whatever it might be, right? It's like it's tough. And I think that pause in coming up with good questions is something that um, my background actually helps me on this. English teacher for 20 years, right, which is all about coming up with good questions for, what do you get out of the story. One of my sabbaticals, when I was teaching, I took, basically all grad level counseling classes, classes on interviewing and asking these questions. And then I've done the work for over a decade working with men, and this is outside of, this is a nonprofit stuff, working with men, working with teenage boys. So, I've really been schooled in how do you come up with good questions that aren't leading, right? That don't have a simple, yes or no answer. 'Cause, oh, I hate them. That telemarketer calls and says, Mr. Anderson, do you like throwing money out the window? And I remember this call because it pissed me off so much. And I'm like, yes, I do. I'm doing it right now. If there's an, don't ask a question if there's only one answer, if there's only one accepted answer, so the journal questions, I don't know what you need to be the best dad that you can be in the moment, right? And it would be foolish for me to say, now I know some good questions to ask, right, to get you thinking about what's that going to be. And that's what I really strive for and worked on in the journal, is that any dad, can take the journal and you can go through it. You can randomly, just pick I have a index, so you could sort of look at shortened versions of the questions, see what grabs you that day, and go there and do some writing. And I think I wanted to create something that's not as daunting as a blank page, right? Because I think I do a lot of journaling. I've done it for a long time, but I know for plenty of people, you see a blank page and it's like, well, what the heck do I put on that? Because the possibilities are endless. Having guided questions, like, oh, okay, that's what I'm gonna, write about.
What got you to journaling? Sorry, JJ, I just had to ask this. Like, was that something that you seeked out yourself, or
What
was there a time in your life that you said I need change, or did someone a mentor guide you, a therapist, or why journaling for you?
So there's a couple different times, and school was the first place. This is funny. I am a pack rat, and I found a box in the garage. I opened it up, and it had an English notebook from 1983, and my English teacher had this journal. And I would have some journals would be just crazy about somebody's birthday party and why are we in school, just kind of smart ass stuff, and some other things. And so I've been introduced it early. And then when I was actually in school for getting my master's degree in English, uh, I read a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And what she did is she called this is the one that really hit me about how valuable it could be. She called journaling morning pages. And in that book, which I recommend, and I used to always have an extra copy, right, that I would pass on to the next person, especially if they're doing some sort of artistic work. But she talked about how every morning write 3 pages, and it was a way to just clear those thoughts out of the mind, out of your mind. And then what I turned to make it practical for myself, though, because I was doing a creative writing, it was a part of my master's. I would every morning do some of the journaling and write a poem. And so I turned it into something that both cleared my head a little bit and then also was working towards my goal of, finishing up this degree. And so that was the one where I think for it was over a year I wrote every single day. And then in the last 20 years I would go in and out of that. And then whenever I would stop for a while and come back to it, I would be like, why in the world have I stopped? And so I think yeah, I got notebooks from on and off for, 30 years of journaling. And I think I can't even, it's been I think been a couple years this last batch and just writing eh, every morning. And for me, um, it's just, I find it a good morning routine. And some days it'll be boring as heck, and other times I'll be, the two places I get the most ideas are walking and journaling. And so, I could write this about,
Mine is
what's
three
going on.
thirty in the morning when I'm trying to sleep.
Oh, well, hey, do you have a little notebook next to your bed?
I do, yeah,
That, hey, when it comes, right, you have to write them down. Or I don't know about you, but I forget them, even if it
yeah.
seems great.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget that. Oh, crap. What was that idea? Yeah.
No, I like what you're saying too. Like some of the benefits that I didn't foresee when I started journaling was, years later returning to some of those journal entries and like seeing that mindset and perspective. That when you're in the moment writing it and you think you've got it all figured out, or you're so lost that you can't figure it out, and you write it, and then to go back 2 or 3 years later and see where my mind was like, oh man, like, how, so naive, you thought you had it all figured out, or how did you not have it figured out? It was right there in front of you. And some of those experiences of visiting past Colton and seeing where my mind was has led to some really great new insight moving forward, and who I was then writing that and who I was reading it and who I am moving forward from that. So I think that that can be a really healthy benefit to our growth. But like I said earlier, I think also can be very uncomfortable. You know,
It
um,
it it can, but just to do the flip side of I have absolutely read in the past. I was in a really lousy relationship for a long time, and like why I stayed in way too long. And when I look back at those journal writings, it's like, man, guy. But
yeah,
then there's other stuff too that you don't just capture the rough times, right? You can go back and see some of the highlights, which I'd forgotten about because I really was into creative writing and poetry and doing that in grad school. And I found a journal that was about being at an open mic, and my folks had come up from Illinois to be there. So my friends are there, my mom's there. I took like third place or something, so I did well, and it was like I had totally spaced that out and forgot, that I did that. So it can be a neat time capsule, both for, oh, look at, why didn't I get that, but also what have I overcome. And oh yeah, that that wasn't as bad as I thought, or that was, pretty cool. It As far as you talking about the emotional stuff, which is real, I have also done uh, a bit of research on journaling, right? And as far as, and a lot of this comes from medicine, right? You can think about nurses, right, who have a huge caretakers, huge burnout rate. One of the things that research has shown is getting nurses journals, right, to write about what they're going through is actually a great way to actually handle. And you can imagine it's about as stressful as it can get. You got life and death and the whole works going on, and journaling has been shown to really help regulate emotions. It's a place where you can get stuff out on paper, right? And it's just that separation in a sense of, right, getting it out of your head onto paper, can give you that perspective. And there's a lot of different things journaling does. It isn't just um, that's backed up. That's not just some guy saying, "Hey, it worked for me, so it's going to work for you." It's like, no, here are the things that it actually does. Here are the ways that the different ways it actually works with who we are as humans.
So when you meet a man, meet a dad who comes to you and says, I am struggling with my anger or patience, or I'm struggling with the time to, get some of this in there. Whether we're talking about, like with self care, we could be talking about good healthy eating, sleep, you know, exercise, all the things that we think, are beneficial to our minds and bodies. If somebody comes to you and says, I don't know how the hell to start, I don't know where to start, I don't know what in the world I can actually do on a regular basis given my schedule. When he comes to you with all these thoughts, he's already kind of given you pushback pretty
Mhm.
much. How do we get somebody on board with the idea, and where is a good place to start with most men?
Uh, well, I would say number one, as far as supplies go, it does not get any simpler, right? Some paper and a pencil or pen. That's it. A little notebook, a big notebook. Your height. So supplies are easy. I actually have a small pocket notebook, right? That sometimes I'll just take with me if I'm going someplace and I'm like, no, their idea is going to be coming. So number one, the nice thing is it's not going to take much. You already got paper around somewhere. You got pen. Time wise, right? You can get value out of it in 10, 15 minutes. So as far as, hey, look, your schedule is huge, but come on, can you find 15 minutes? Can you find 10 minutes in your day? And I think if they can't, then holy cow, that's the first issue we need to talk about, right? And help that man figure out, okay, I am so overwhelmed that I feel like I don't even have 10 minutes. So, before we can get to the value of journaling, I think there's going to be some other things. So supplies, 10 minutes. When it comes to what do I write? Right. And on my website, I have a free little PDF that actually, when it comes to emotions, and this comes out of a training for the medical professionals. Basically, you said anger as the example, right? If you're dealing with anger, one of the things is that you can do is create a set a set of questions, right? And they're going to be like, what happened? What was I feeling? What was I thinking? What did I do? And that's kind of encapsulating. So you actually can take a step back and say, okay, and then what can you try differently in the future? And so if you have just those 5 questions, you can print them out. You can, you can just have that. I would even open up the journal, right, and put on those 5 questions, right, right on one side, and say, okay, man, you want to deal with anger? Take this, keep it with you, and after you've gone through one of, you've had that time where your anger got the best of you, or it showed up, or maybe you got the best of your anger, which is great. You used it. Okay, answer those 5 questions. And what that can start to do, right, is number one, then the person's not carrying it around, right? It may be their guilt about how they acted, or there's nothing I can do, right? That frustration because, okay, I've got this little thing to try the next time. And then that journal, say it's your anger journal, right? Put a Hulk sticker on the front of it. uh, that can become your training, right? And you can see, oh, look, when I tried this thing, it worked. way to go, me. When I tried this thing, it got worse. Okay, don't do that again. So I think that would be my short spiel for, hey, okay, I don't have time, I'm angry, but I want to do something about it. That would be one way that journaling could help in that situation.
I'm thinking about my own experience, hesitation, and love for journaling. You know, much like you, I wrote a lot of like poetry. I think as a release when I was a kid. I was very artsy, played guitar, so I had one of my notebooks always got designated as like the lyric notebook, and I was always writing anything between lyrics and short stories, mostly fiction, but there was a lot of real elements of what I was going through existentially, weaved into those, and I think that that was my outlet for a long time. And I stopped that after high school. You get out on your own and you're trying to survive and pay rent and go to work and all this stuff, and I just didn't do it. And when my life was falling apart and with addiction, and I went to go get clean, that was kind of my reintroduction into journaling. I worked with a sponsor, and you write down everything, every transgression that's ever been done against you. That one time in third grade that kid spit in your lunch, you write it down. Or that time in fifth grade when you spit in a kid's lunch, you write it all down. And I never had done that before. And I met myself with a lot of hesitation and oh, this is so stupid. Why do I have to do this? And, I remember when I was in college, I was in a film and television class. It was a production class. So, we were behind the camera learning how to use the technology. And my professor was this artsy fartsy, hippy dippy, granola painting, denim wearing, overalls kind of teacher. And which I love those people normally, but she wanted us to do journal entries every day, 15, 20-minute writing in a journal. And I was like, why do I have to do this for this class? I'm supposed to be learning how to do a camera, like not these journal entries, and I never thought that she was going to read it, and I was like such a punk kid at the time that, a lot of my journal entries were like, this is so fucking stupid. I don't want to do this. I don't understand the point of this. Fuck, shickity, fuck, just to get through it. And she made, this public announcement in class, like, a lot of you think I'm not reading these. And she kind of shot me that glance. And I was like, oh man, she's totally reading them. But, in my reintroduction and I'm going through sobriety, once I've surrendered to that process and just kind of like got comfortable with revisiting those memories, purging myself of them, and like really having the patience with myself and love for myself of like, it's okay, you didn't know this then, or you were going through this, or because a lot of that I hadn't had for myself. It was like those memories maybe spark up as you're in the shower and it randomly pops up in your head and you go, God, why did I do that? Oh God, that was so embarrassing. I can't believe I did that one time, which happens to me a lot. But then they pop up and then they're gone, and the journaling was like, let's ask some more questions. Let's just like uncover it layer by layer here. And like, why did you do that? What was going on in your life at that time? Where was your mindset? And that building of confidence and love for myself that like, it's okay to mess up, but you're still a good person because you're trying to analyze this, dissect this, grow from this, and learn from it, was what I needed. But it was just so painstaking at first because I think I had so much baggage from my history that I didn't want to address. But then that just built up into a resentment for myself, until I was really able to get comfortable with being honest with myself. And then it was like a drug, oh my God, like this is the Colton that I've been wanting. Where's he been? Oh my God, I can finally see him after you uncover all this stuff.
So do you know where the switch happened, or what did it take to move from the no, this is stupid, don't want to do it, don't want to take the
I thought I was
risk,
gonna
or
die, brother. I thought I was
okay.
gonna die. Cocaine had gotten so bad in my head that I was having suicidal thoughts. I was going through depression. I didn't want to be here anymore. I was completely unhappy, and I literally thought I was gonna die if I didn't get help. And having a sponsor, dedicate an hour a night, 2 hours a night with me to sit on the phone or meet me in a parking lot somewhere at an Arby's, just to hear me cry in his car as I read over these journal entries.
Oh, wow.
Like it didn't feel like there was the sense of like, this is the structure, these are the steps that you take, and we need to do it. And maybe he doesn't really care what I'm going through, or he doesn't really, know me or love me in that way. But I also surrendered to that, and I said, well, this guy's coming out every night. If that's not a proof that he's caring for the stranger, and bearing
Yeah.
his soul, then I don't know what is. And I think that just love and understanding and humility was what I needed at the time, because I think I had gotten so caught up in my head of no one listens to me. No one understands what I'm trying to say. Everyone gets mad when I get mad because I'm just trying to explain why I'm mad. And I would just get stuck on that part of it. If everyone could just understand why I'm mad, then they would understand where this anger is coming from. But I didn't realize that it was me that needed to understand that anger. And I didn't need the approval of all the external,
Wow.
when I thought I did. But as I was going through this journal process, it showed me that I didn't need all that validation from the external. What I needed was the validation from the internal, and the love for myself that I had gotten so far away from. And journaling was a really great, like, come here, buddy. Let's give ourselves a hug, like it's okay,
Yeah, I think what we're talking about here is expressive writing, through journaling, and that's one thing that's really kind of what we do in expressive writing is it's not so much emphasizing what happened, but rather what it felt like. So, Colton, you going through the process of expressive writing sounds like very much an emotional release and self discovery. Not alone, or not just that, but you're also doing some form of coping. And then through that process, you probably recognize mindfulness and creativity, and your own version of expression and how to problem solve. Much like therapy, sometimes when we're able to get our thoughts out there, then we're able to feel that feeling that we're talking about rather than the event and recalling events. We're talking about the feelings from within, so we're able to put that expression out into the world, and therefore it becomes real, it becomes true, it becomes something that I can have validated. So the idea of, and I think we talked in a previous episode, going to therapy allows for that expression to be seen, to be heard. And then when you journal, you are actually putting to paper a physical form, a concrete example of what it does feel like to feel. So then therefore you're going through that self-discovery process as well as coping through your journaling.
And it and what you did too absolutely required an element of courage, right? To actually put out that stuff, that vulnerability, and to even to put it on paper, right, can be incredibly intimidating, right? Because if we keep it buried in, right, there's this, I at least I know for myself, right, when I kept it buried in and didn't say that, I thought I was protecting myself, right? And then what I found out as I did that is like, no, I'm not even living my life because I'm not showing up as who I am. So I fully understand the fear. And for anybody out there who's going, whoa, that's too far, the great thing about journaling is you set your comfort level, right? So when you're doing this, maybe there's some stuff that is back there, but you don't want it, you're not ready. Well, man, trust yourself and start with something smaller and build. One of the things, and I actually saw the um, Theodore Roosevelt, Rough Rider president, just ridiculous history. If you look at this guy, he kept a journal. The day his wife and mom died, same day, all he put in his journal was X. The light went out of my life. He there was, and my guess is right. That was all he was capable of in that moment. And
Honestly,
so,
it's probably one of his most famous journal entries, you know?
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a guy who wrote
It's
like
the most
37
raw
books
and
or something.
vulnerable. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just there, Sometimes we don't need other than to just get it out and then for to see it and know, oh my God, somebody else is going through the same thing. And oh my God, just that feels so much better.
And you get to practice. Nobody's looking over your shoulder, right? And you can put down something small and see how that feels. And maybe you put something small down and you're like, whew. And you're a little shaken up a little bit, right? And then like 4 hours later, oftentimes I've found like when I'm working with people, it settles. First like, ah, dang, I don't like this. And then, 4 hours later or the next day, it's like, oh, okay, I feel better. It settles down. And so if you're going to do this through journaling or you're talking to somebody, you can do those small steps, right? And try and practice and see how it goes. And you can always go deeper. You can always kind of come back to the surface and think about, where you are uh, in the moment, right? Yeah, because I mean, Colton, come on. What you faced, right? And did I can't imagine it, right? That's and to do it and to work through that. I mean, Mike, how much better do you know yourself right now? I can only imagine, right? And how much better are you for your family and yourself, because you did that work, which, hey, started out of desperation, but man, you started it and you faced it. That's um,
I mean, this seems like such a simple thing to do, right? Like to just spend 10, 15 minutes with ourselves is all you're really asking somebody to do is just like sit with yourself and think about your body and mind and spirit and how those things are either conflicting or working against each other or in unison together, and we just don't do that. We will constantly make up excuse after excuse after excuse. I'm too tired, I don't have the time, and I don't have the space. And it's really just as simple as sitting down with yourself and having the patience and courage to do that.
and there is an edge though to writing things down. One time I used to work for MnDOT, Minnesota Department of Transportation, and there was this dumb thing that happened, and we were denied, my little group, this budget thing. And I did the math and I wrote it down on paper, and I'm like, wait a second, this is 0.000047% of the budget. you know and I looked at that number on the page and I'm like, I gotta quit. It was like the final straw, but it made it concrete. And I think that's a reasonable, you know, caution, that it's like, if I've spent so much of my life denying certain things, it is going to be scary and can upset, the apple cart sometimes when I face it. But it's also, you know, if I'm not where I want to be, right? If I'm not expressing really, who I am and being the dad that I want to be, right? Or just being the person that I want to be, then then I think then I think it's worth the risk,
Yeah.
to do it
the,
and
the
face
the
that.
stories we tell ourselves, right? I mean, we do it so easily and so quickly as we move from task to task through our day, of how to cope with these feelings, how to move on, or how to get through something, and we tell ourselves these stories, these realities. And like you say, when you're writing something and it's concrete, that adds a whole different element and perspective and awakening aspect, because you can't hide from that story. You know what I mean? You go and tell yourself the story all throughout your day, but then when you look at a writing or something like that, and you have one of these epiphanies of like, oh God, where was I? Or that happened, or like what we're talking about here. Dang it, I just lost that. Oh man. It happened. We're like every episode this happens, JJ. I just in the middle of my sentence, I just get derailed. Oh no, but it's you're not trying to project in a journal entry or impress somebody, or well, this is what they told me, so I know that if they read this, they would really like me, or see that I'm doing the thing. But when you look at it and it's just you and your thoughts, and then you can go, wow, Okay, there's no running for myself here. I said that. I was thinking that. Like, why, what, when, and how?
So, here's where I want to, when I was doing the research, like a couple cautions, right? When it comes to journaling, two things that can absolutely happen is narcissism, right? We can just get so wrapped up into our story that we just keep, story, 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 and then all of a sudden we have 6 months of journals blaming Dale for everything, and it's like, if Dale shows up every day, maybe it's not Dale, or maybe it's partially Dale. But so, one of the I don't want people to think, oh, and grab a journal, it's all good, right? Because with any tool, there's things to be careful about, right? And so that narcissism, staying focused, and so that's something to be aware of, right? And one of the ways to just move out of that, right, is to actually journal about other people. I mean, who's in your life, who can I help, or just, how are they doing, and that can, pop you out of that. And then the other part is rumination, right? Like if you get stuck, say you did something, you hurt somebody, right? And you feel terrible about it. What you don't want to do is write about how terrible you feel about it again and again and again and again, right? Because that's not healing. That's not, you just get stuck in it, right? And you keep knocking yourself down. So, those are two things to look at in the rumination. And this is how one of the things I think can help with that is, and in my journals, I always have the prompt, you know, blank space where you can maybe write once, maybe come back a couple times, and then a spot for an action step on the end. Because I think if you do that, okay, yeah, I screwed up. Okay, are you just going to end it with I screwed up and come back tomorrow and start writing about how you're going to, you screwed up again? Or are you going to end it with, okay, well, here's something that I learned, right? Here's something that I'm going to do. Maybe it's make amends. Maybe it's just give myself some grace or do a step. But I think for anybody out there, right, when you're journaling, think about the end, giving yourself a little space to, I even highlight it sometimes, highlight the aha moment, right? There's something that's like, oh man, was I highlight highlight something that gives you some insight, or come up with just a small step, right? Small step, so it's doable, of, okay, so what are you going to do? What can you do positive, right, to move forward on this? So hey, JJ, so how much journaling do you do?
Well, it's been a lot of an uptick recently, Steve, and the reason for that is, as
Read
I
us an
might have.
entry, buddy.
Well, it's not exciting right now, but basically, for the listeners and for you guys here, I had experienced a toxicity in my system of an antibiotic, and that has resulted in physical disability, and I'm in a state of recovery. So my ruminations, if you want to call it that, have been on my side effects. We'll call them symptoms at this point, and kind of keeping a journal of what that looks like. One of the benefits I think that you kind of just you highlighted in what you just said is that making a return to some of these thoughts and seeing your progress, kind of putting stuff down to paper when you can recall what's taken place, you can see some of the progress that you're making, whether it's through your own mental health journey or it's physical journey like my own right now. Actually, it's kind of both, because the symptoms sometimes hit me in heavy relapse waves, and then therefore I feel like I'm taking more steps back. Well, if I take a true look at my journal in the last month, I'll realize actually there are some serious strides that have been taking place here, and I need to celebrate those, so I'm not keeping myself locked up in a prison of dangerous thoughts that don't actually help. And then, of course, as we know, the body feeds the mind feeds the body, and therefore we're causing more anguish and more pain rather than noticing the true healing that is taking place here, because my mind and my body are truly remarkable, and they have the ability to not only do some great things physically, but they also have amazing ability to be my cheerleader if I allow for myself to put these thoughts to paper. Or if I have the computer nearby. So my journal entries have been a little bit, we'll say, off the regular path recently due to my health struggles.
But though, that is great what you're doing, though. And if you think about, journaling isn't just for emotional stuff, or just for like the diary, or the record keeping, right? You're using it for your health. I mean, imagine being the dad who shows up to the doctor, right, with some notes, right? This is the third time I've been sick, and these are the symptoms. I mean, you can have that medical, that health journal, that where you get to keep track of things, right? And that the patient who asks the most questions typically gets the best care. And so that journal can actually give you some confidence. I don't know about you, but I haven't done this. I need to start. The day I go to the doctor, like my throat, my glands might be all swollen. I have a 8 a.m. doctor's appointment. I wake up, I feel great. Or it's like my symptoms seem to disappear right before like I go to the doctor. It's like some fear in me is like, well, you're gonna be fine, right? And so I get to the doctor and I'm like, oh, it's not so bad. I'm good. And he's like, really? How'd you? And I blank things out. I leave them out, right? Whereas if I actually wrote down what was going on, I wouldn't blank it out because I'm trying to look good to the doctor, right? Or be strong so it doesn't look like I'm weak or something. And it's like, he doesn't care how tough I am. He probably was thinking, I hope this guy isn't too tough because he won't tell me what's wrong and he's going to be back in 6 months. So that's a man.
Well, I have a question here for you. I made a joke earlier about JJ sharing his journal entry with us. But, you were talking too about like that kind of narcissistic pattern that we can get in with telling ourselves these deceptive stories and, displacing the blame onto the external rather the internal responsibility of it. And I'm curious if you do this practice and if you think that it's beneficial or maybe harmful to this process to share these journal entries with other people.
Um, let's see. So I typically don't share like a full journal entry. I will share an idea from it, right? I think I had one. I had a terrible incident in that bad relationship I mentioned. Um, my partner at the time actually went onto my shelf and grabbed one of my journals and read it and found something that she didn't like from my past, and that was so much. It was terrible for a long time. There was a case where if you're going a couple things, if you're going to share it, right? Um, who are you sharing it with? How trustworthy are they? Why are you sharing it with them? I was just reading. There's this real um, Brene Brown has this book on leadership, and this is funny because I was just scanning it the other day, and she talks about vulnerability, and she mentions that sometimes here's the danger of the flip side. Somebody will be super vulnerable with the idea that if I'm very vulnerable, then you won't get mad at me. Right. So if you're sharing something that might get the other person mad, but you think, well, I'm being vulnerable, so you can't get mad at me, you are setting yourself up for failure. So um, I am I'm not against it. I would think, why are you sharing what you're sharing? You know, and how do you think? Because I think like with my boys, right? If I have something good and I haven't yet, I share my writings with them. Um, I could totally see reasons to share, but I could also see how me just telling them what was in there could potentially work. So I'm not against it. And with those things thrown in about why am I sharing this? Do I have an expectation of how that person's going to respond when I share it? And is that realistic? Right? Because
Yeah,
they get to
yeah.
get mad, or sad, or they get to respond however they want, which is going to be shaped not only by your relationship together, right, but by what happened in their past, and even your past as a couple, or whatever that might be. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's tricky, and it could be powerful though.
Sure. Yeah. I have experienced both sides of that coin in regards to I think how it can go, and I brought this up initially because you had asked me like what was that turning point, of where like you surrendered to the process of this, and you know I think for me part of that was sharing it with my sponsor, having another human being that was again taking that time to create a space for me to just unload vulnerability on him, you know um And that felt very cathartic and therapeutic. And I had spent the first 30 years of my life training myself into this mindset of, yeah, they're to blame, this happened to you, this is why. And that was the first. Oh, dang it, I lost that thought again. Shoot. But also, I can see that this has a negative effect too, in the sense that when I was doing this and I was coming to terms with all of this behavior or these lies that I had told in my previous relationship about my drug use, or where money gone, or where I was that night, or what I was doing, or who I was with, yada yada, and as I was purging all of this stuff from me, I was sharing some of that with my wife in that mindset. Like you said, this is going to bring us closer. She can't be mad at me because I'm finally being vulnerable. I'm finally being honest. Brother, it was the complete opposite. She was even more pissed when she started hearing about all this stuff that I had lied about for years. And now I was like, bro, you remember that one time? And I felt great after I said it. And then I look over her and she was like, all this baggage that was just compounded, of our experience together. And she did not have that cathartic, therapeutic experience. At the end of it, I felt like there was more resentment from her, and so I can kind of see both sides of this coin. And I think ultimately, though, for my journey and growth, I needed to share those things. I really did, regardless of the outcome. I hoped that she would forgive me and trust me more and we would grow from it. But even if I wasn't consciously able to admit that at the time, I think now looking back, it was like I needed to do that, regardless of the outcome. Even if I knew it was going to be bad at the time, I may have talked myself out of it in that moment, but I can see now from a growth standpoint of like, I did need to purge that, but it didn't go as I had hoped. That's for sure.
Well, and that's the thing too, right? There's the initial response, and then there's the response the next day, the next week. That's why I'm not here to say, right, because maybe that blow up, right, that anger is just that feeling that the other person needs to go through, and at the end of it, but it's not instant, right? It's like maybe it's a couple of days and the person gets to process it and deal with it because you've just changed their history, right? This is what they thought history was, and now, oh, wait a second, no, it wasn't. So that's going to take them some time to process too. Yeah, and I think when you think about it, sponsors, counselors, typically they seem to be about the safest, most logical person to go with the radical 100%, honesty, and it's a place to practice too.
I remember the other point I was trying to make earlier too. That I had spent 30 years of my life training my mind to be this person, and I just lost it again. Oh my god, I'm so sorry, guys. This is embarrassing. How my brain does this. Oh, I got it. I got it again. I got it. It's right there. Hone in, Coley. Hone in. So, I've been telling myself the story of myself and excusing my behavior and pointing the finger at other people and blaming them. And what I found cathartic about sharing those journal entries with another person was that they questioned me on those motives. That there was no chance for that narcissism to build up in it. The way that it was structured, like you said, you don't want to spend months and months just writing about how awful this thing makes you feel, and the way that the steps were organized is like, you purge all the bad stuff now, like get it all out. What did everybody do to you? Let's start with the blame and all the finger pointing. Let's get all the external out. What did all these people do bad to you that makes your life so poor, horrible, and you the victim? Then it was, well, what did you do? What did you do to all these people and to all these other things that you thought no one was around and watching, and having somebody again there to challenge those things and say like, well, why did you do that? Well, dude, that doesn't sound right. Do you think you're really like living up to what you just said you wanted to be? Because the way that you just read that and wrote that makes me think that you're still in this narcissistic kind of mentality, or that you're still looking to point the finger at it, And the way that the steps were structured was you get it all out and then you kind of look inward, and then you kind of look towards well, what's the next step? How do I make amends? Then you got to go out and apologize and have those conversations with people, and either accept the forgiveness or accept that they won't forgive you. And those are hard moments that you have to go through with each person. But all of that, in the way that it was structured, I feel is like the same thing of what you're doing here. And that's why I asked this question, because I feel maybe sometimes with our lack of knowledge, tools, or experience, it can be really easy to fall back into these narcissistic patterns or to not grow out of them, you know?
And you got me thinking too, with like how you looked at your wife and her facial expressions, right? It's like we do hurt people, right? And if we're going to confront that, right, that means we're going to have to see that and experience their hurt and their pain, right? And I'm thinking about my wife and my boys. If I've done something, it's like, man, I would love to avoid that, right? But I'm screwing up if I'm avoiding facing the pain I've caused the people I care about. Well, heck, and why am I causing other? It's okay to cause pain to people you don't know, right? So, man, yeah, and I think this is why I think one of the reasons journaling is so badass and it's so damn scary too, because that's it, man. You are saying, okay, you don't have to. You can do a journal to keep track of things. But if you're going to dive into the emotional, look at my life, where I'm going, that kind of stuff, you're going to have to face, where you feel like you're falling short. And then, but on the flip side of that, and this is funny, this I just wrote this morning, and it came from that book that I read. There's a lot of, for me, cross flow between reading a book, getting an idea that shows up in my journal. I, apparently like Brene Brown, am lousy at estimating how long it takes to get things done. I always shorthand it. I can do this in 4 hours. It's going to take me 8. I can do this in 2 weeks. It's going to take me. And so I oftentimes feel really frustrated with myself because, damn it, why am I not done? Why haven't I made this deadline? And it's like, well, Steve, you didn't make the deadline because it was a ridiculous deadline to begin with, because you put things that I couldn't control. Like I'm doing a Kickstarter thing, and the thing locked up for a couple of days. And it's like, I can't control that, right? But I knew I'd go in and get everything done in 2 hours. And so in my journal, I highlighted here. I will show you. That's what I like about highlighting too. You can go right to it. I almost always underestimate how long it will take to get things done. Time to start being more honest with myself and my abilities. That's what I wrote this morning. And it's like, oh, dumbass, but it feels good too. It's like, you are in your 50s, but okay. And I've got some, hope and a plan that, the next time I set a deadline, I'm going to be pausing and saying, okay, Steve, hold on. And I've already extended one that I had that was unrealistic, and I feel better. I'm like, oh, geez, I was creating my own tension, and that's just a small thing that pops up in a journal because I read a book and it came out, and just because I've got that morning time, and you can do it anytime, right? I mean, hey, if you can get it at lunch, go. There's whenever you can, and sometimes different effects, right? Because maybe it's hard for you to sleep, so you do it at night as a way to get some of those thoughts out and end with your task for the next day, because that can create some pause to it. But um yeah, it's a hell of a tool for self-care, and you can use it to generate more self-care. What are 5 things I can do right now, right, to you know fill in the blank, right? What are 5 things that my kids would like to do? Which one can I commit to? That's, or what I mean, what do I want to do in my relationship with my partner, my wife? And I always, big stuff, that's nice, it's in movies. I'm a big proponent of the small things that you can do and you get to success. And this comes from the neuroscience stuff, right? You get a small success, dopamine hit, and you can build to the great trip to Yosemite Park, right? But how about you just start with, an hour after the kids are to bed, when you and your wife just hang out doing something relaxing, So it is a heck of a tool that, I encourage men to try, and you can't screw it up. And if you really feel bad about something, rip out the paper, throw it away. If you're really bad, burn it. You know what I mean? And that thing is, gone. It can be a place to just try stuff out, and you don't have to be good at it. You don't have to be an English major. You don't have to write poetry when you were, a young guy like Colton and I did. Um, you know, um, Tough Guy's Journal.
I also was a creative writing major, just FYI. So we're all in a good shared space here. But yeah, and I think the one thing that I heard a lot here is the journaling gives you that pause that sometimes we just need. In the moment, we fight, flight, or freeze. Sometimes when we're not in a safe space with our own emotional state, and when we can take that time to journal, we recognize things. We can make it messy and ugly, but what's one thing that we do when we go to a therapy session and get our thoughts and feelings out? We improve upon the dialogue that's taking place in the moment. We're giving that pause, we're giving that opportunity to let it breathe, let it get out there. And then, truth be told, is we naturally, when we journal, we focus on the self, because we can't speak somebody else's story into the pages that we're writing. And so when we go back to visit these communication, these relationships and communicate, we tend to communicate differently, or we can, based on our journal entries, using I statements and really focusing in on the feelings that I've had, as opposed to the story I'm telling you that you've done to create these feelings in me. Now I'm been practicing regularly how it is that I feel. So it can be a natural booster to your own communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say too, if you're doing it, you don't have to let your kids see that you're journaling. Let them know. Yeah, yeah, Dad journals. I like to write stuff down. And and if your little one is putting in a journal that said, "I saw a dog today," awesome. That is one killer journal entry. Its name was Mitzi. Cool. You know what I mean? But let them see that you find value in taking time to write about your thoughts or what's going on. And then you got the added bonus of being a role model, with a tool that we didn't even get to, like the learning benefits of journaling, right? About what you're reading, your school topics, and all of this stuff. So we can, set up our kids, even if they don't like journaling or they're not the ones who are going to be the big writers, right? To just say, okay, hey, we're going on a fishing trip. Make a list. What's the stuff that you need to bring, right? And you can have your little vacation journal or your packing, and because not everybody's going to love journaling, and that's totally fine. It's definitely worth testing it out, right? And there are things, actually, thinking about the different things. We talked a lot about emotions, which for dads, huge. But yeah, the other stuff, learning, keeping track of things, man, and it's so cheap. Supply wise, you're in, it's private, unless you want to share it, right? And Colton, you gave a good example. There might be times when you absolutely do, right? And maybe it's the whole thing, maybe it's a part of it, but now you get to use it as a way to express yourself.
Yeah,
Sweet. I'm sold.
It reminded me of a funny story as we're talking about sharing journal entries here. We've really tried to rebrand our timeout time here, to like a calm corner or a reflection space. So we have journals over where we used to do our timeouts, and when we set them there to take a moment, it's to reflect, not just to sit. So they will do their journal entries as they're feeling all these emotions. And there's been a few times where after the quote unquote reflection timeout has ended, they come and bring me the journal, and they want to show me the page, and it says, I hate Coley. He's so mean. He's the worst dad ever. And, same thing like we're talking. I don't know if it's her intent that I'm going to be like, oh, sweetie, I love you so much. Thank you for being vulnerable. But I react just like my ex-wife. How dare you? So before we let you go, though, brother, I had all these lists of questions to ask you, and of course we just like get talking, and I didn't ask a single one. So we're gonna have to have you back, man, and so I can ask these
Oh,
questions, so you can give me some of this science with the journaling. But
Yeah.
one thing I did really want to touch base with you, and I want to ask before we wrap up here, is you came on last time to talk about self care, and we're here to talk about self care in this journal. And I want to know, like, what are some of the questions, or how have you structured in this journal a way for men to differentiate between like healthy self care and that narcissistic patterns of mindset that we're talking about? How can we,
yes.
a one guy's self care maybe I want to watch football and drink a six pack and ignore my family all day. What can we ask that guy to see if he's really like maximizing the full potential and benefit of what we're trying to talk about here?
Yes. So an immediate right is thinking about the impact of your self-care. But just to go back to 1 second, if you've got little kids too, or drawing pictures counts for journaling, right? So you could absolutely ask yourself or your child, right? Draw a picture of how you're feeling, right? Or what you want. So scribbles, doodles, all of that stuff, that counts. As an adult, if you like drawing pictures, draw a picture in there of whatever stuff. So I just wanted to add the imagery. It's not just words. As far as structure, and I'm grab it. There's if you want, and I know a man who's doing this, he's actually blogging about it. He's going to the first question, he's going to go through all of them. I did design it with, it starts with division, and I think that's really important, right? But where do you want to go? But you don't have to start there. You can bounce around and just go to the question. And I think if you haven't done a lot of journaling, and I think you can spread this out. This guy's doing every day. I think to me, these are some heady questions. Personally, I space it out a little bit. I think starting with your vision is very helpful because then it's like you've got that end goal. Now all the other questions have something to refer back to, but then you can jump around. But really, what the journal will do is I've got an index that you can just go right through to see what the questions are, right? But there's a lot of looking at where you're at, right? Looking at, like, there's one question talking about the self-care too, is like, what are 3 things you could do for self-care, right? Which one do you want to choose to try for that, right? Or thinking about, there's a lot of questions of for example, what's dinner like, right? What's family dinner like? What would you like it to be? And I also have some notes in the beginning, or I think it's actually at the end too, that to remember that as we're doing this, right? And I am guilty of this, right? I have had some great ideas for the family that the family's been like, no. And I'm like, but it's great. And they're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, oh crap. I guess it's not, because it's so one of the things as we're getting these ideas, right? And you talked about sharing. This is perfect for that. Just because I write down what I would like family dinner to be doesn't mean everybody else is on board, but it might be a great place to say, okay, family dinner, um, I want us to be able to talk, which means phones are gone, or whatever it might be, right? So that now, all of a sudden, instead of just sitting at the dinner and being mad because it's not going the way that you want, but you haven't verbalized it right, you can say, okay, you can have that family discussion where it says, you know what, I want more out of dinner for us as a family, right? And you will have journaled and thought about it, and you'll be able to go, okay, so you know what, I would like us to do this. And it can become, depending on the age of your kids, right? Because the older they are, the more input, and typically, if you want things to go smoothly, has to happen. But you can start that conversation from a place of, hey, I've thought about it, I've got some thoughts, and um, you know, but a better chance of success if I've thought about it, and where I want to go, and then being open to, cool ideas that can come from other family members, right? So I think it's both, you get a chance to reflect on what shaped you as a dad, right? And also think about big and small, what you're doing that's either helping you or getting in the way. Like, what are your biggest time wasters is one of the journal questions, right? And I think that's for anybody. myself included, and it's like, okay, what's the one you want to tackle, and what's a small thing that you could do to start making a change there.
I love this, man. I can't wait to get started on my own copy here. Where can our listeners pick up a copy of this? Or look, Jay has got his copy right there. Where can our listeners pick up a copy for themselves or check this stuff out?
Journalinsights.com. And so if you go there in the shop section, there will be that journal. And what I'm going to do, and thinking about deadlines, right? But damn it, I'm going to do this. If you put ADHD dads, put in a 10% discount, I'm going to make that happen. But I'm going to give myself a week, not 8 hours to get this done.
So next week on, what is it, August, then try the code, guys. All right, we got to give Steve accountability, but grace at the same time here. Okay, with this new revelation he's had about himself.
Yes. So, but I definitely put in ADHD dads, and I'll give you a 10% discount on this because you guys are great. So I'm assuming your listeners are awesome also, and that's man, love to talk again.
Yes, please. I want to have you back like ASAP. There's a lot more that I didn't even scratch the surface on here.
Yeah,
so
we went to self-care with journaling, and we need to go to self-care with other methods as well here soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, that code, guys, is going to be ADHDads, ADHDADS.
And thank you, Steve. That's very nice of you. And I hope you guys get a lot out of this journal too. This is great stuff. This is a great space to get started in here. And what a wonderful resource that you've created here and put out to the world, Steve. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. It's always fun talking with you guys.
Yeah, you too, brother. I could do this for hours, honestly. Like, there's always such gold I get from picking your brain, brother. So thank you. All right, guys, that's another episode. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
I'm Steve.
All right, this has been another episode of the ADH Dads. Until next time.